Good times never felt this good. So good, so good. I've been a while. Okay, guys, I'm done. All right, done with singing. Hello, how are you? Welcome to the show. Fishery on Friday nights. I was getting a little tired with the normal schedule, so I thought I'd switch it up and do things a little later. That we could see some fishies a little later. We could talk a little later, and then also, if you guys didn't bring anything to come and party with me, I've got some news. Now, it's not the best news. In fact, it's pretty terrible news. It's about the Amazon, guys. Amazon's hurting. Amazon is taking an L. Definitely not doing super. But let me boil it down for you, and you can just inhale the fumes rather than having to drink that tall, lukewarm glass of water that is the news about the Amazon. So, right now in the Amazon, the water is lower than it has ever been since recorded time. They have been officially recording Western style records in knots and meters, and centimeters, if you will, millimeters too, I suppose. Since 122 years ago, they've been measuring the depth of the river from the mouth all the way to Manaus, Amazonia, a bunch of different places along the river, and keeping pretty detailed records. Now, there's also oral tradition from the indigenous people that lived along the river, and they have mentioned, times when the river got to a certain landmark or a certain rock or whatnot, and we can assume that's probably accurate and so forth. So right now, what we're looking at is a lower river than has ever been seen in the time 122 years that we can pretty much say for certain. But also a lot of these tribes, especially the ones that live on the massive lakes that are on the confluential rivers of the Amazon, they're saying that it's never gotten so low. I mean, there's entire lakes, rivers, passageways. Remember, there's not a road that just goes through the Amazon and connects town to town. Everybody uses the river. The river is where the food comes from. It's where something like 78% of the calories for protein and fat come from in the diet of the Brazilian, the Peruvian, Ecuadorian, Colombian, Venezuelan people. Comes from inland. And it's right now at a point where there's spots where they can't even put a canoe, a little boat in. There's not even water connected to go anywhere in certain spots. And not only that, that affects the entire planet. Now, you may think I'm being a little bit, what do you call it? Hyperbolic with that. But I seriously mean it. So, one example of this, the Amazon rainforest does not have enough phosphates in the substrate, in the soil. And the ancient cultures in the Amazon, it's been a mystery for archaeologists and historians for years, trying to figure out how they knew how to create soil that would grow crops and would grow all the fruits and things that occur in the jungle, but they would grow them in densities 10 to 20 times denser than you would normally find in the jungle. They would also do intentional burning of the underbrush, and they would also save their ash from fires and from that wood from trees that needed phosphates to begin with. But the limiting factor for eons there has been how much phosphate is there. And they were wondering, how is it possible that the phosphates, even when you count all the weight of the trees, acre per acre, say there's 50 pounds of phosphate, pure phosphate, locked in this 100,000 pounds of wood. Well, even then, what happens if it gets cut down, burned down, decomposes, however you want to look at it, whether natural or quicker, you run out of that phosphate very quickly. And where does more come from? What brings it in? Well, this is how the Amazon is so incredibly connected to the rest of the world. The Amazon actually has a larger river than any part of the river from about 2/3 of its distance. So, other than the delta, the mouth of the Amazon, there is a bigger river than the Amazon in the sky. Yeah, in the sky. There is a river of moisture moving with the jet stream and the climate in particulate water. And every little particle of water in our miraculous sky on this miraculous earth has a little piece of dust in it. And in that little piece of dust, you have the center of a snowflake or a raindrop or a piece of hail. And the water is a polar molecule. It collects around that. And so all these little mists, any cloud that's up there is there because of dust. Now, where does this dust come from? Well, this dust comes from the Sahara Desert. Now, that sounds pretty crazy, right? The Sahara Desert's all the way in Africa, and North Africa for that matter. Well, every year there are sandstorms and windstorms in the Sahara due to how hot the sun is on that sand. And it heats up, it swirls around, it makes these giant hoodoo storms and blackout conditions, brownout conditions. And then it goes all the way over the ocean in this river that is bigger than any river in the entire world, that is flowing in the sky every year, every day, and just different amounts, different elevations, And this river brings the perfect amount of phosphates to the Amazon rainforest. It falls as condensed water, so the water is up high in the clouds, 40,000 feet, 30,000 feet, light fluffy clouds that are all over, Then it comes over the land, and the land is of sudden abrupt warming over the surface of the water. And so where the water's been slowly evaporating in warm water around the equator, it's picking up more moisture that's forming around all these little dust particles that are in the atmosphere. And if they weren't there, you'd have a blue sky day, and your water would evaporate up to around 1,000 to 10,000 feet, that first marine layer, but it would burn off later in the day and recondense. It would either turn into a fog or mist or settle back down. But because of those little particles and the heat exchange going on, you get the incredible mountain-high clouds, taller than any mountain, double the size of most mountains. And you get 40,000, 50,000 foot cumulonimbulous clouds and cumulus clouds building into these thunderheads and anvil clouds. And they're just packed with energy. And that energy, not only are there literally tons of phosphates that every living thing needs to grow and that the plants need in order to grow, just like they need nitrogen. Well, what's the other miracle about weather over the Amazon? Nitrogen is in the form of clouds, because in those clouds there is nitrogen gas. Most of our atmosphere is in fact nitrogen. It is not oxygen. Our atmosphere is 30-some% oxygen, but there is something like 70% nitrogen. There's a bunch of other things, CO2 and carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, sulfur, you name it, methane. There's other things in the atmosphere, but the two main ones are going to be your oxygen and your nitrogen and your hydrogen, and they are going to be in the atmosphere. And what are those going to be doing, floating around as molecules in with the clouds? Well, when lightning strikes and the heat, 50,000 degrees, 5 to 10 times greater than the surface of our sun, hot enough to be at the center of the sun, strikes for a moment, it actually can fix nitrogen from a loose elemental state into a usable chemical. And as those particles of phosphates rain down and the wet season comes and the cumulus clouds, thunderheads come in over, this is the Amazon, come in over the Amazon, and the water was kind of cool and wet. Well, it gets over here, and the Amazon is still like a sponge. It's still full of water, and it's beating down with heat and sun, and that is radiating, and it's making a cloud layer, which then traps heat in more, which then makes the humidity higher. And I said water is a polar molecule that builds up, 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 and that builds into those massive clouds, and you get the lightning storms. And as that lightning is created, what it does is those little dust particles that were in the cloud that made up all the water droplets, they freeze when they get too high in the atmosphere. And then they start to snowball and get bigger and bigger, and they turn into chunks the size of ice cubes. Sometimes they're even the size of bricks or basketballs. And they're up there at 30 or 40,000 feet, and they start falling because obviously it's going to fall. The updrafts of the hot day are not enough to keep a brick of ice in the air. So those updrafts form, and that friction of the brick size ice falling while the little pellets are moving up, every time it collides, that friction of it smashing together charges the entire cloud as a polar molecule rich environment, like a network. It charges the thing like a city grid, and boom, lightning strikes. This lightning then causes the nitrogen to fall as it was a gas, but also in particulate form and in this kind of sublimated form, and ozone and all sorts of other chemicals that are only created by this crazy weather and up high in the atmosphere and on our planet that's just the right distance from the sun. And it all falls into the rainforest, and the rainforest uses up 99.8% of what falls on it. That leaves you 0.02% of phosphates and nitrates that are not used by the organic trees and plants when you have a diverse and native ecosystem intact. That means that that entire rainforest, the entire Amazon rainforest, evolved to be perfectly in tune, to be the perfect size gear in a machinery that works together with cogs that need to be just the right size for everything to line up. And what's going on is right now in the world, whatever you want to blame it on, it appears that the gears and the cogs are at different sizes. We have these different sizes, different amounts of heat, different amounts of wind, different times of year when one thing is going on when it should be another thing that's going on. And the people who have relied on this for thousands of years, the indigenous people of the Amazon, they told us this week that something was very wrong. They told us a month ago that something was very wrong. They've been telling us for years. And now when we can't get our international freight from China, Japan, South America, all the way on the other coast, on the Pacific coast, going down around and into the Amazon and going all the way back to Peru to be the Atlantic side of Peru, going upstream something like 2,000 miles or 3,000 some kilometers to deliver massive cargo shipments to the people inland in the Amazon, in places like Iquitos and like Manaus. Well, now there's not enough water in the river. It's too shallow. And so you get these ships that now we've built them bigger and bigger, and we have this super tanker called the China class ship. And this China class cargo ship is built because now we've widened the Panama Canal. Well, the Panama Canal is wide enough now to take these massive ships so they can go all over the world. And we now are building ports in the US and other places big enough to handle them. And now we are seeing that these massive ships, when they go other places, we don't have the means to unload them or to get them up some of these rivers. And so we think of things like, hold on guys, I'm dizzy. We think of things like dredging. So dredging is what we do to the river. We dredge the Amazon River, and while we've done this historically, the problem with dredging a I do read the comments, Dirty Dan. I just wanted to get the show going. I wanted to, rattle on about the plight of the Amazon while I was thinking of it and thinking of how interconnected our entire world is and how it's not just the Amazon that's suffering, it's the Arctic, it's the island of Borneo, it's the little island that has no name off of Indonesia. The millions of little islands that have no name, the little rocks. It is every creature on Earth that is connected in some way. And our hobby should be something that teaches you about finding these connections, about enjoying and being elated when you connect the pieces of these puzzles and when you find something that is a new connection that you've never seen before, when you learn that the way that nitrogen is created and used in living organisms is not the same as the nitrogen that's all around us in the atmosphere. It has to be fixed. It has to be basically reconfigured molecularly into a usable form. And while we all need nitrogen or we'll die without it, and plants do too, it is the thing in the aquarium hobby that turns into ammonia. That ammonia is. It's what ammonia is, essentially, and hydrogen. And it is a molecule that can be deadly or can be life-giving. Well, speaking of when they're dredging these crazy shipping canals that have been relied on now for 50 years, which is a blink of an eye in the age of the river. And I do want to point out, for anybody who's saying, yeah, well, the climate does things, and who knows why. Well, that is true. The Sahara Desert was once green, and it wasn't that long ago. They think 7,000 to 12,000 years ago, it was probably a lush place with one of the largest lakes in the world, Lake Chad, as well as another lake. And what is currently a seasonal marsh used to be bigger than the Great Lakes. And that is now sand. We don't know what was there. We know that there's monolithic cultures and that there's pyramids and there's vaults and there's, stela that are 100 tons in Anatolia, Turkey, and the Middle East, where we find Neolithic cultures doing things 8,000 years ago. We see, more recently Stonehenge and things, and then Egypt itself in the northern Sahara, northeastern Sahara, it has the pyramids, of course. And ancient Egypt as a culture started noting what they were doing around 2900 BC in writing, in a form of writing we can still read today, in hieroglyphics, and later cuneiform at the same time overlapping throughout the Middle East and then being shared, and then they've got the phonetic alphabet. But in any case, they've been documenting things like what the world was like around them, pictures and drawings of it too, and animals that we think of as from the south of Africa were in the north of Africa. And that's because they had savannas all the way in northern Africa, and prairie-like conditions. But when we talk about the Amazon, we talk about what's going on there. What happened with the native people recently in the last few months is that we are seeing them come out of the rainforest. We are seeing the indigenous people of the Amazon leave the protection of the jungle and come out almost naked, without weapons, and with their hands up. And some of them came slowly, some of them came emaciated and very skinny with bloated bellies, something like dysentery or virus or bacterial infections, likely with famine and drought being an issue. And a lot of them had clearly walked over the forest and then, swam or canoed for a little stretch and then walked again and then again back to the, portaging away until they ran into outsiders. And at a logging camp that was a legal logging camp in Peru, almost 200 indigenous people that have made it very clear that they do not want to be contacted, came out of the jungle and said, "We need help, we're dying." Literally holding children, and the children limp and lifeless. In some cases, they've come out and they've been okay, but they're telling stories of loggers coming into the camp and killing everyone from women to children to men and using firearms. They've talked about them using helicopters to do this. Now, these indigenous people, they've run into a lot of trouble because they were basically forced to become a part of society. For a lot of the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries, the plan was to send them to boarding schools or cities, teach them a vocational job, teach them Portuguese or Spanish or English, maybe have them work at a mission or something like doing Jesuit work. And then we would send them away to that. We would not allow them to speak their indigenous languages, tell their oral traditions and myths. This is how we had the knowledge. The people that ran into the forest and hid, those kids that refused to be broken in the boarding schools all across the Western world, all across North and South America, all across the Pacific Islands, that said, "I'm going to tell the story my grandfather told me. Even if I'm only 8 years old, I'm going to tell it to the 6-year-old kid in school. And I'm going to tell it in our native tongue." That kind of resistance is a type of resistance that you can't quantify, that they don't make movies about very often. It's not sexy. It's not brave, as they say usually. You're just telling a story, right? Well, you're keeping a culture alive. And it's very fascinating that that is how now we rely on knowing how things occurred. I mean, for instance, here in the Pacific Northwest, the Native Americans that live in the Oregon and Washington and Northern California region, they have an oral tradition about all the volcanoes in Cascadia, in the Cascade Range of the mountains. And they know when Mount Rainier went off, counting back generations, they're off by something like 5 to 10 years, the window of when they say, okay, it was 12 generations ago that the last eruption happened. Before that, it was 46 generations ago. Their oral tradition appears to be accurate, and this is insanity because we don't even have written history back to the Egyptians. We don't even have accurate written history going beyond about 4,000 years. Maybe you could argue 6,000 years in the Indus Valley. There are some early forms of pictographs. And older than that, we've got 50,000-year-old hieroglyphic type things and pictures and handprints on walls and caves and things. And going back beyond that, a million years of people making marks. But when we talk about language, telling a specific story, chronicling events and measures and being able to measure and pass down information so that we don't have to start over every generation. We don't have to relearn as a species. That's what makes humans incredible, is our ability to empathize and our ability to communicate and to think. Okay? Now, I've already done an episode on how fish and marine protein, as well as freshwater aquacultural proteins, so clams, crayfish, crawdads, whatever you want to call them, mussels, things like that, are very likely one of the things that allowed our brains to grow. When the human species moved into the African Rift Valley and moved a little bit farther south and into South Africa, our brains, after 7 million years of growing from 300 to about 500 cubic centimeters in all that time, all of a sudden, in 1.4 million years, they grow from 500 squared or cubic centimeters to something around 1,800 cubic centimeters in Neanderthals and some of our past Homo erectus cousins. Now, we settled around 1,500 cubic centimeters, our big old brain, and that you can't do that without protein and energy. Now, you could eat a lot of avocados or whatever and maybe get there, but it's a lot more plausible that with the advent of cooking and fire and hunting and bow and arrow and atlatl slingshot, that we were able to get protein from animals and other sources. But humans, as unsexy as it is, just like it's unsexy to be the storyteller or the kid that's resisting colonization in a boarding school and telling the myths of your culture, the religions of your culture, the stories of your grandfather and grandmother and great-grandmother and great-grandfather, it's not super sexy to think about humans like scraping slimy algae and spirulina off rocks and cracking open mussels and oyster shells. We want to think of ourselves as like, yeah, we speared the mammoth, or a mantis. Either way, you could spear a mantis. But we want, we want to think of this like heroic story. And, it is a heroic story. It's a crazy story how this all ended up. And then that species walks all the way across, or maybe makes boats and gets all the way across over to the New World, North and South America, and now they are the indigenous people that have been there for 10,000 years or 15,000 years, maybe 20,000 years. We don't know how long they were there, but it keeps getting older, the proof. And that's something we did not expect. The proof now exists that humans were in South America and North America when the Bering Land Bridge was not connected. It was an icy wall, literally 2 miles high, almost 10,000 feet of ice in some places, literally to the point where it's weighing the Earth's crust down, and we still get earthquakes in the Midwest when part of that crust goes bing and springs back. So, hey, Big Steve's Glass Box, what's up, Tristan? What's up, Sweet Caroline? Yeah, you were at the beginning. And what's up? Good to see you. Ari Cat, hello. And Merced G, hello. So, yeah, and exactly, it went on with, it went on in Mexico. It went on with the Sami people. It's gone on so many places. Hugo the Goat, you can sure get a shout out. And so these people keep this information. They move around the world. They learn all the nuances of the place. Just like I said, the phosphates and the nitrates that rain from the sky because of storms in Africa, sandstorms on a hot, dusty desert, form hurricanes, which then form these massive systems that come all the way across the ocean, holding all these little minute particles that end up weighing tons and tons in phosphates and nutrients and trace elements that our plants and fish need to live in the Amazon. Right now, things are out of balance. You turn off the spigot on that ocean and that, more like a river, and sometimes it turns into a marsh in the sky that's flowing across with the heat around the equator and the moisture around the equator. And the river can only drain for so long. A lot of the river is in the form of trees. We don't think of that because it's a weird idea, but the trees capture so much of the river and so much of the elements that our fish need in the form of food or whatever is not just locked in an insect that they eat or in fruit that they eat, but it's locked in the trees, it's locked in the soil, it's locked in the body of the indigenous people that died there and they lived there and they ate and they built calcium and the KH and the GH that will be in the water and allow for freshwater snails and amphipods and crustaceans to live in the low ranking of the food chain. That is all a web that's connected, and it connects back to us. And right now, as I was saying, these people have come out of the jungle where they felt safe, where in the past they came out and they were met with violence, and all of the sudden, after decades from what we understand from the outside world, several of these people have come out of their various tribes. We believe there's 118 tribes right now in the Amazon rainforest that we consider uncontacted. And the organization, which has a new name now, but it used to be known as FUNAI up to about a year and a half ago, FUNAI keeps track of these indigenous regions. They're massive reservations of land. And while I told you guys in a standalone episode about how companies like Microsoft and Apple and Tesla and a whole bunch of other banking companies and things that were on the list were buying carbon credits. And carbon credits are basically saying, I feel bad, our industry is polluting the world. Can we buy land in the jungle and preserve it? And we'll get that money back in the form of tax cuts or in the form of incentives for something. And companies as well as governments set up a whole trading network to say, okay, if you are a company and you're using up fossil fuels, you can buy the carbon credits there. Or if you're cutting down trees for paper and things, you can buy the carbon credits at this rate. And you can exchange them, and in return, we will pay our indigenous people that are very impoverished, that know the land, we will pay them to be park rangers, and we will pay them to do sustainable agriculture, small farm, small family coffee plantations, for instance. And unfortunately, what happened, as we found out most recently, is $1.2 billion in 3 years under the Bolsonaro government in Brazil went to a single family and the people they paid off. And they took the carbon credit money that these corporations around the world paid, and because of bad oversight and the lockdowns that were going on and no good regulatory bodies that oversee world events, that's a whole discussion in its own. It turns out that about 6 guys made a plan, and they bought a bunch of land and said, look, it's preserved, check it out. They filmed there, they walked with the indigenous people, and they said, hey, you can live your life making textiles and, maybe ecotourism, coming to the river and seeing the beautiful pink dolphins and collecting fish and looking at birds and birding and taking pictures, National Geographic filming, all these things with permits and travel passes that need to stay in different facilities and different hostels. They could be run by the locals. And it seemed like this great plan, this great story. And then it turns out that what they did is they put aside that land, they filmed that stuff, and then they literally sold off that land illegally. It wasn't theirs to sell. And with gunmen that were just gangsters from the city, that were impoverished second and third generation indigenous people and African American Maroons, as they're known down there. In the favelas, they hired these guys to come be the gangsters to enforce no police, no indigenous people, no activists, no outsiders to come in to these areas they were strip mining. And these areas were already shut down because on the edge, it's mapped out where we're supposed to go. No one is supposed to. Those indigenous people that have been there for thousands of years, you are supposed to go into the native reserves. And instead, they cut them down. They sold them to gangsters and cut them down. Then they took the profits from the first few flips and they bought bigger bulldozers and they bought trucks and they built muddy roads with logs literally as the street. And this whole thing is just detailed in agonizingly put together, painstakingly detailed report that came out of Manga Bay journalism about how $1.2 billion in Brazil alone was just squandered. And not only did it not help the ecology, the biology, the rainforest, the Amazon River, it actively destroyed it. The way these guys did things, they had G-Wagons and they had Ferraris and Lamborghinis and Rolexes, all these modern, flashy, expensive things. No care whatsoever. They didn't even try to hide that they didn't spend money to preserve anything, that they didn't have any programs in order to, replant the rainforest or in order to help indigenous people or to help the mixed indigenous and also just citizens that are very impoverished, oftentimes living in rural parts of the country, open businesses, hostels, gas stations, repair shops, things like this. And what do those same people do? You may think, Alex, why are you going on so long about all this environmentalist stuff? It doesn't have anything to do with my aquarium. I want to know about my aquarium. Well, these people now don't have any jobs. They don't have any jobs because the government came in and marginalized these people. The government told them, get off the land, come into the city, be a part of what we're doing. And then whether it's racism, classism, sexism, or tribalism, they on one form or another become marginalized, and they have to stick amongst themselves. They end up in massive neighborhoods, especially in Rio and Sao Paulo, but especially in Rio, called favelas, and whole villages outside of that go for miles and miles that are just literally cardboard, brick, and mud shacks. And these people, they just want to live. They used to live off the land with, a very, very small footprint. And now, even though they eke out a very meager existence, their footprint is something like 5 to 10 times the size of what it would have been when they were subsisting on the environment, living in an indigenous type way like the last few thousand years. Not to mention that then you get into the big cities in Brazil and things, and people are living just like they do in big cities all over the world, using something like 50 times the water. And you make it all the way to the US and parts of Europe, although Europe's gotten better. So more like Japan, the US, parts of China, Singapore, England. And we are using water and electricity and resources sometimes 100 times what the indigenous people would need for their daily use. And it's just wild. So then you think about all the things going on, and you think about how these indigenous people and these poor Brazilians and Peruvians that lived off the land for so long, that were ripped from it, taken away from their language, from their culture, from all the support structures they had. And then a new government comes in and says, okay, go back on your land, and nothing's been improved. Or maybe they build them a great new city, but it's a city, and what are they supposed to do with that when they're used to living in huts? What are they supposed to do with that when it doesn't jive with any of the things they've done for thousands of years? And so the same thing drives these problems all over the world, the inequality, the poverty. And this, I know people hate it when I talk about it, but it's the neo-colonial thing. It is a system, a class warfare, essentially. And yes, in some countries, people are mobile and they can rise up out of that. And you can see that as a really cool thing. And, I think that's a cool thing. But at the cost of somebody else on the bottom barely existing, making things for cheaper, or renting at a price that's 2/3 of the money they make, or no health insurance, or whatever it may be. Especially in the developing world, it gets really bad. And so, of course, these people are gold mining. Of course, these people are smuggling things. They are taking the last parrot of a certain kind out of the tree. Their kid's stomach is grumbling. They haven't had food in 3 days. What would you do with your family if it's between you and some bird that's already 99.9% extinct? That's the argument that we hear, whether it's Bucephalandra or whether it's Arapaima. We hear it all the time, or not Arapaima, Arowana. We hear people say, well, let's just collect the rest of them. They're not going to survive another few years anyways. They're going away. They're going extinct. Let's cash it out and make our big bucks now. And so then there's a rush. There's the sick and twisted thing that happens when a species is under the final years of its life, the final pressure, the final python squeezing and wrapping around that little creature before it's going to have its snack. And everybody swarms in. The pressure increases right at the end because everybody wants to sell that last dodo or that last whatever bird and grind it up into, whatever dick pills for the people in Asia. So They are dredging the Amazon. And the Amazon, yeah, it happened with orchids, Ari. You're totally right. And yes, we are our worst enemy, Craig. I agree. We could be our best advocates in the planets, but we won't. And Lush and Salty Aquarium says the Earth is now like God's aquarium during a crash. It's getting there. It's incredible how resilient the Earth is. How many systems are redundant? Like the way that the phosphates travel across the ocean and the sky and then rain down on the Amazon in the amount that the Amazon happens to need within 0.02% of bulk net weights. And yet, you know, with all that dialed in, it's kind of a razor's edge when things get messed up. I am drinking Dr. Pepper. Have no fear. Have no fear. But they're dredging the rivers. The indigenous people that were uncontacted, and that's a misnomer. Some have been contacted. Some have things like guns, even like rifles. And it's because they've traded with one tribe who trades with another and another and another. It's been 600 years, basically, 500 years since people from Europe started showing up in the Caribbean and South America. And so some things have made their way in, including some not so good things like alcohol, that their society doesn't have a paradigm or a place to put that. When you are supposed to be egalitarian, you're supposed to be all helping out and all doing your part, and your survival depends on it. You bring in a factor like alcohol or something addictive or smoking or whatever, where there's no health system, no formal doctors or anything embedded, and it can really ravage a culture. We've seen that all over the world, right? We see that in Australia, we see that in America, we see it in Canada, and we see it everywhere. Africa. So anytime you bring a new force or element into the equation to a society or culture, there are bound to be repercussions. And if it's something addictive, something harmful, of course, it's going to be all the greater. So the dredging that's going on, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world in the Amazon, which again, it's at its lowest point in 122 years of record keeping, about 1,000 to 2,000 years of oral tradition from the local indigenous people, from the Yanomamo, amongst others. They have said, like, you know, the rock, this sacred rock that they have, you know, at the fork in the river, has not been exposed to the point where there's, you know, whatever, some marking on it or some indent, other than 22 generations ago. Like, and it's incredible that and beautiful that people are telling these stories in their song and in their dance. Sometimes actually in South America, you know, you guys know I'm an anthropologist, archaeologist, and historian. Quechuas, we didn't know what they even were when I was in school, and now we're really figuring it out, and they're a beaded, knotted cord that tell a story. Not only are they a counting system, they're an alphabet system as well. So you have a chord, and if there's a square knot, and this isn't how it really works, but bear with me. A square knot, that means an A if it's on a blue cord. If it's on a red cord, it means a B. If it's on a yellow cord, it means C. Then you've got a bowline knot on a red cord, and that's going to be a D. And then on the red, you know, an E, F, G, you know, and then like maybe whatever, the pink dolphin might be 2 knots and 1 shell of a certain kind. So they have these things that just look like a handful of strings, but when you open it, you can wear it as a dress, you can hang it up in your hut, and it is, in fact, a story to remind you of the oral tradition passed on. There's also basically like keepsake ropes in the Quechua if you go more inland, not in the Amazon, but up to the Peruvian Andes, and they actually had like reminders for several thousand years of history, and they had, a knot or a keepsake or something, and the family or the tribe, the group in the area agreed, like, okay, these things we can all agree on, but then each person will also have keepsakes or little beads or little carvings that slide on the rope and mean something special. Or maybe when you knot the rope or you tie two of the lines together that had been strings, that means that, this is your mother's side and this is your father's side. This story, all the letters, you tie it, and then it branches out into three colors of rope again, and then you knot it and you spell out whatever you're saying. But they use it more as a reminder so that they can tell stories over and over, and so that they're not playing a game of telephone, so that they're actually accounting for things. And when you start building civilizations the size of like Machu Picchu or Tenochtitlan, if you look at like Mexico City, you can't just wing it with like, how many stone bricks do we need and how big should we cut them, what dimension. You have to write that down. And while the Aztecs and Mayans had writing systems, other people had oral traditions and just passed things on by word of mouth. But any culture doing massive building projects, massive engineering projects, and excavation for irrigation canals that go for 1,000 miles in central Mexico, for instance, throughout Central America, that takes a lot of planning. They need to know like the slope rate. They need to know the gallons. I mean, it's crazy stuff. They could predict thousands of years in the future what the moon and the planets that they knew about were doing. So don't underestimate these indigenous people, these cultures, even if a lot of them have vanished or significantly changed. It may be that their apocalypse already came, that they were living a certain way in the jungle. They decided to build a big city, and building big cities in the middle of a rainforest, you use everything up, and then you ruin the balance that nature had set up for you as a piece of nature, as something that evolved in nature. All of a sudden, you screw it up and you think you're above nature, and you start using way more than your allotted space in nature. I sure do. And it will fall apart eventually. And so a lot of cultures, like the Mississippian mountain culture, the Mayans, Aztecs, the Incas, even before European contact, which killed probably 90% of the population, if not more, some of those societies were already falling apart. The Pan-Incan unity of 5 different cultures all up and down the Andean mountain range, they already broke up something like 300 years before Western contact. The high and mighty days of the Inca had already passed, and the Mayans had collapsed like 500 years before that. So, anyways, back to the Amazon. What's going on, Robs? Good to see you, buddy. And Craig, good to see that you got some new... you got some new plants. Right on. Love that. And a super chat. The first super chat of the night. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Robs. You missed my little soapbox speech talking about the Amazon. We will talk, Jackson Cunningham, we can talk about the aquacultural stylings of Tenochtitlan. I have a talk that I give that is on aquaculture going back thousands of years. So the first fish being kept, even though that wasn't for ornamental purposes necessarily, but the first fish being kept, which was usually for food, and then over time, somebody important in society gets control over that. And then usually a certain class of person or a certain person in the family or tribe or society becomes like a skilled fish breeder or keeper, and they know the secrets to how much to feed, when to do this, when to change the water, when to open the floodgates, when to let them out to spawn, and when to change like sizes of pools, or when they'll eat each other. And all this stuff becomes a responsibility that's important. They need things like calendars. They need things like accounting systems to weigh out how they're going to split up all the king's fish for, 2,000 tribe members or whatever. Like in Hawaii, they have some ponds of salt water where they kept fish of many species, and they collected over 40 species that they would account for and that they would allow to basically grow up in a man-made lagoon. And only, like, each family was allotted, you could go get certain kinds of fish every day, and then you could go get bigger or rarer, tastier fish like once every month or once every year. And some things were only for the king or only for the priests. And pretty soon you get this fetishism or toadism, as in talismanism or a totem on a totem pole, where you get things like the mormarid in Egypt that becomes a death sentence if you eat a mormarid. It was so strict and so followed that we have yet to find a otolith, or an inner ear bone, that's the thing that lasts the longest without decaying, in most cartilaginous fish, but we don't find any ear otoliths at all in the trash piles. And these are the people who built the pyramids, literally at the rock quarry and the camps where they were working in sometimes 100 years at a time or 50 years at a time. And there is trash that's been burned, and it's in piles, and it's been burned and compacted, it's been buried, burned, buried for, hundreds of years. Sometimes thousands of times this has happened, because they go back for the granite to the same area, or they go back for the marble to the same area. And we find every fish you'd expect in the river, but not mormarid otoliths. We can account for all the other fish, but not mormarids. And sure enough, in these tombs from the same era as we're assuming is from the bones and the remnants in these shell middens and fishbone middens, we see that there were decrees that said the mormarid is a fish with magical powers. It is a deity. It is not to be killed. Sort of like cats, which were a little different, but seen similarly. Do I have guppies? Indeed I do. We can go look at the guppies. Actually, we can go feed some fish. Oh, that tasted so good. I shouldn't have chugged it like that, but man, just so good. So, the dredging of the river. Let me finish that up. The Amazon River is being dredged right now, and because so many indigenous people had to turn to poaching, illegal mining, logging, and doing illegal cattle ranching, clear cutting, palm oil, illegal harvesting. There's all these scams and schemes, and who could blame people when they're starving? I mean, I get why it happens. I'm not mad at them. It's a systemic problem. Why do we allow so many humans, fellow humans on this earth, to suffer? Not why do these guys burn down the rainforest? Their kids are literally not getting food at night. What would you do? You would risk jail if it were about your wife, your kid. Some people would do it for their dog, So these people doing whatever it takes to survive, I understand it. And when they are doing the jobs like mining, they're leaving mercury and arsenic, as well as sulfur and other things, in the rainforest in massive amounts. So Venezuela, I just saw a report by Manga Bay also, as well as the IUCN Commission on Endangered Species, and they cited in a report talking about some freshwater stingrays and about tortoises, and they were talking, as well as dolphins, they were also talking about how the lead was causing them to be born with developmental issues. And in very intelligent species like dolphins, it's very important for them to be able to communicate and be able to read cultural cues, literally cultural cues within the dolphin world, certain noises and squeaks, and when one goes up ahead and, you know, jumps in the air or whatever they're doing, it's a language. It's an understood thing. And they're finding that the ones with mercury and lead in their environment, they can't function properly. A lot of times they beach themselves. A lot of times they end up stuck in shallow puddles and ponds that dry up in years like this year. Sometimes we see hundreds or thousands of the dolphins wash up, and it's heartbreaking. And now we're doing dredging because the Amazon River is dropping right now at 8 inches a day. Yeah. The center of the Amazon River, Manaus, that giant city that is the superhighway of South America, that you can run super tankers and speedboats up and down and all which ways, and that all society down there is relying on because they don't have trains. They only have planes and boats. There are no roads connecting the countries there in the vast majority of cases. If there is a road, it's very limited to a specific area. And it's more like tuk-tuks and bikes and go-peds and motorcycles, stuff like that, and machinery trucks. And the digging up they're doing in the rivers, they didn't realize how much illegal mining was going on, to the point, I mean, look at some of the photos that just went out the last month, taken from the most recent survey of the native reservations. Those same guys who were selling the carbon credit lands to develop as mining lands or whatever, they sold them off and they made pit mines. They literally hire people at like $1 to $6 a day to crawl down in these unreinforced mines, dig holes sometimes 20 feet deep, and then spray them with a fire hose with a generator and a pump set up on the river and being run with gasoline that they also have to bring in the middle of nowhere on tribal land, and they're just blasting away the hillside in a pit. The thing could collapse, people die all the time. And then, of course, being poor, desperate guys living out in the middle of nowhere, being overseen by criminals, all sorts of things like gambling, prostitution, fights, murder. I mean, all sorts of terrible things are going on in these logging camps and in these mining camps. And then you add in the weird tension between classes and races and economics that go on with the indigenous people that have lived in the favelas and lived in the slums in the city and been told there is no place for you here. Go back to where you came from by, you know, the average worker, and yet the government has some program saying like, you too can make it in our country. Smiles, you know, and they're left behind. And so, yeah, we need to fix the underlying issues. We need to do things like, you know, Project Piaba is a good start, but we've talked about at the Green Earth Alliance, Ivan and I, we need to be able to buy fish from these people, teach them how to breed fish on the river in nets that they can make out of fiber from the jungle, or in pits that they dig and little moats and canals. We can teach them to breed things like ornamental plecos that won't even breed in captivity because they need certain foods and algae and biofilms. They could be doing that as well as raising things. Right now they're learning to raise tilapia, which who in the hell thought that was a good idea? Tilapia and giant gourami are the most consumed fish in the Amazon as a aquacultural endeavor, followed by arapaima. At least it comes in third. But I mean, they're eating Asian fish just because the protocols are set up. The protocols aren't that hard to map out and to teach. We need workshops in these places. We need to show people that they can better the environment. They can patch up the damage that has been done by these big greedy corporations and by people who aren't doing anything inherently evil. They're just trying to survive, but they're the ones kicking up the mercury in the water when it comes down to it. They're the ones putting lead in the soil. They're the ones using arsenic and mercury and cinnabar to cook down the little flecks of gold in the soil so that they can get one little, half a grain of rice of pure gold at the end of a week or whatever it ends up being. It's very meager and nothing is guaranteed there. Now, at the same time, Brazil has kind of half-heartedly outlawed things like mercury without massive permits and paperwork. And so there are illegal bootleggers selling mercury and handling mercury that are indigenous people that don't know anything about, other than, yeah, don't drink it or whatever they're told, like obvious things. Don't do this or you'll start having seizures or you'll start losing your ability to walk or go blind or whatever it may be with arsenic and mercury and some of these other chemicals. But they're bringing them in and they are using them in order to gold mine in areas where they can't afford big separating machinery that can cost millions of dollars to set up an entire plant. Instead, they use a little bit of mercury, put it over a fire, put it in a crucible, mix it up, and then cook it down, and then they add a little bit of soda and a little bit of potash, and then they, mix it around, add a little silver, and then they come out and you've got this little thing. And then a lot of times they want to disguise it so it doesn't look like gold. But this is all going on, and we didn't even realize how bad the problem was until we started measuring this week how high the mercury was in the river. Something like 300 miles away. Mercury is not a light thing. It's a metal, guys. And it is downriver hundreds of miles from where they dredged the first canal they're working on. And the only saving grace is that there are dams on a lot of rivers. Now, on the main Amazon, there's not, but on the side channels, there are a lot of dams. And hopefully, that can serve as a filtration point or a stopping point for some of these things. Yeah, and inhaling the fumes of the mercury, yeah, exactly, Nunya. That is insanely bad for you, and that's what causes all sorts of crazy neurological damage. All right, guys, so we already knew this. What are you talking about? You just found out? No, I'm talking about the fact that this week they're dredging the Amazon because the Amazon is at the lowest it's ever been in recorded history and in oral tradition history by the native people. Mercury is used for collecting the gold, and it's oftentimes in conjunction with silver and other rare minerals. Also, things like graphite, cobalt, and coltan are going to be coming up in the near future. And there's the potential for America to come in and say, you need to do this permittedly and undercut China's prices and provide that to the EU or to America, who needs these rare earth mineral conglomerates. They make different mixtures of them for phone circuitry and so forth. And the Chinese want to swoop in and buy this while we're kind of deciding, I don't know, we should probably put some things in place so that, this, and I don't know if I want to deal with that country and blah, blah, blah. We're just dragging our feet, and right now China's saying like, hey, we got cash. We'll buy that up right now. We'll buy out the rights to your graphite mines, to your cobalt mines, your manganese, magnesium, all that stuff. That's all this week. But the dredging is what's kicking up all these chemicals. My point being that the entire Amazon, yes, it's a huge place. It seems like it goes on forever. It seems indestructible in certain ways. And yet, nature has evolved and has built a system where the phosphates from the Sahara Desert make it all the way to the Amazon, and they provide the perfect amount of nutrients, save for 0.02%. Calculate all the trees. I don't even know if humans could do that, and then allocate the resource, then put it in the sky and fly it over in tiny little particles that are not able to be metabolized or incorporated at all, in the form when they're in the air as dust that's only a few molecules or a few a few molecules of a substance together making a little dust fleck so much smaller than you can see, and it's in the rain, and then the rain falls down, right? We talked about all this. Well, you couldn't engineer that as a human to make a river in the sky that delivers the perfect amount of phosphates to an entire rainforest that's mapped out in a crazy blob shape at different elevation sizes, different times a year. It is only nature that has arrived at this balance, and that's why it's so important that we understand it. It's mind blowing. Yes, thank you. So I was upset that the native indigenous people are coming out of their preserves, which they have not done since the 1950s and maybe the 1970s a little bit. We tried to go in the 80s and 90s. They shot at the people who tried to go in, and they said, leave us alone. We don't want your smallpox. We don't want your guns. We don't want your problems. Leave us alone. And that was the policy for most of South America. It was to leave them alone, and we set aside big swaths of land. But now the big swaths of land were bought out, clear-cutted, turned into gold mines, turned into rare earth mines, turned into basically slave labor. And the other thing is, a lot of these indigenous people are getting used by these companies so that they have to pay for their room and board, and it's more expensive than the money they'll make on an average week in the gold mine. So they are indebted to the company, which is really just a criminal cartel. And all of this is to say that we need to support people like the Research Center for Ornamental Fish in the Amazon that Dr. Matrrial is working on, and looking at aquaculture, how to sustainably source fish in the Amazon. And not just the whole Amazon, but very locally. Work with specific tribes, specific lakes, specific behind this dam that's been blocked off, and maybe certain fish that haven't returned ever. Well, we need to reintroduce them if possible, if that's a good idea. If not, then c'est la vie. But we can come up with creative solutions as a society, as scientists, as just caring citizens. Reach out. We can make networks happen. I mean, I know people on the ground down there right now that can make these things happen. And that's why we started the Green Earth Alliance. Then we're working on getting the diamond tetra put back in, hopefully by 2025, early in the year. Back into its endemic range, which it hasn't been in since 1986. All right, guys, let's feed some fishies. I know you're tired of me. I look like Jack White. That's a new one. I've heard Jack Black. But let's turn this around and start our brown into... So, guys, do you guys know Flip Aquatics? Robert Lupton and his wife? Well, I think it's Kayla. She and him are in town, I think. Maybe it's just him. Are in town for a talk tomorrow for the Seattle Club. So they're going to be at my house in 8 hours. 9 hours. I don't really have that many shrimp to show them. So I guess I'll show them some Malawi shrimp. But they always offer up my house when they come. When the club brings someone to go exploring or seeing fish rooms, and I'm like, guys, my fish room is free and available for everyone to gaze at online all the time. There's nothing like mysterious or special about it. Like, take them somewhere that is, like cool, like somewhere that is a view into a world that they never get to see or something. But no, they just keep bringing people like Hans Evers here, and I'm flattered. That's great. I love meeting the people. A lot of times though, I'm kind of pooped by the time it's time to end the day, and it's time to go go to the actual auction. Tubifex worms. Is my puffer gonna eat them? I don't know. I'm really worried. Oh, he liked the bloodworm. We knew that. Will he eat the tubifex worms? I don't know. We're gonna keep an eye on him. We got way too many in here. We'll give a few here, a few there. We'll give some more though. Down here, I got my sunshine pleco in here, and up here we'll decorate things with some of these tubifex worms, right? We'll decorate it like a little Christmas tree. Deck the halls with the holly. 'Tis the season to eat jelly beans. Blah 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 blah. Well, I think he just wants bloodworms. Yep, that's what he wants, bloodworms. And I don't know where Bob is, guys. Where's Bob? Yeah, my puffer gets along with the other fish. He'll nip every once in a while at the diamond tetras. But that's about it. Sometimes the angelfish, he'll nip the fin. I mean, not hard. Clearly, he doesn't actually take a chunk out of it or anything. But he will eat fluval bug bites, which is cool. I didn't know that puffers would go for those, so that was a happy surprise. And yeah, look at the little lapis, imperial lapis tetras are eating up the tubifex worms. I haven't fed tubifex worms to my fish in years. It's been quite a number of years, and so I was kind of curious, what their little fishy brain thoughts were on it all. Well, this guy seems pretty happy, eh? These are those Pantanal red black phantom tetras, not red phantom tetras, red black phantom tetras. Real confusing. Then there's the black phantom tetras right here, the normal kind. And then there's the fully super red black phantom tetra. I don't think I even have any of the red phantom tetras right now. Okay, so we'll leave this tank to appreciate its little diet and all the worms hanging out. Don't know where Bobby Boy is. He was here earlier. My sweet betta that comes and lets me pat him on the head. I don't know where he is other than he was like down in the moss about an hour before the stream. Whatever. Oh, yeah, there's that black phantom tetra, the normal kind. And some headstanders, just to switch it up. They're an old favorite in the hobby. And there's another one. And then there we got some males and females flirting around. Also, if you like these zebra autosynclus, which are one of my favorites, these are such a cool fish. They look like plecos or little sharks, but they just eat algae and biofilm. And, once in a while they'll eat like a worm or something if it's in the tank. But these guys are awesome. And normally they're very expensive. They're like $25, $30 a piece. And they are $12.99 at Moonlight Aquatics. Plus you get 10% off of that price if you guys want to use my discount code. What's the white things on the glass? Are you just talking about the white in here? We've got frozen Daphnia, frozen brine shrimp. We've also got live brine shrimp and cyclops, tubifex worms, and bloodworms in this here mix. So it's a pretty wild concoction of stuff. I do want to get a few more. Man, tubifex worms are kind of annoying, aren't they? I kind of do want to get some more, though, in for the sake of more of the bloodworms in for my sweet little, where'd he go? Puffer. I don't know. Anyways, now we're getting kind of a new cast and crew coming through. We in this tank there are a lot of different unique fish, but we've got a lot of You got the diamonds, you've got the rummy nose, you've got these little guys, the normal black phantom tetras and the red phantom tetras, or red black phantoms rather. Also, look at these guys swimming against the current. That's one of those autos. Um, and we've got the Bolivian red-eyed lemon tetra. Also, we've got more of those zebra or marbled autosynclus. Gotta love them. Gotta love them. And then over here, we're giving some love to, giving the love out to all the world now. We got some of these first generation guppies looking pretty good. Well, they're not first generation, they're third generation. But look at this male here. I think it's time to move him. Look at this striping on this male here. Look at that. That is quite the tiger striping. I don't think I've seen that many stripes in a row looking that good in a long time. But all of these guys were made by crossing the bright orangey yellow, double blonde and blau recessive female with this male right here. And people have told me, oh, it's this, oh, no, it's that. And they've argued in the comments over it. I was sold it as a metallic, rainbow metallic, snakeskin, Dumbo ear guppy. I don't know if that's correct, completely wrong, or whatever, but that's what I was sold it as. And so that's what I've been repeating. But yeah, it might be, I don't know, a mosaic something or other, or it might be I don't know, some sort of werewolf that only eats small children. Who knows? Whoa, that guppy! I know, pretty crazy guppy. They don't make any guppies like that in female form that I've found. You can only get the males, so that's the whole journey here, going on about, I don't know, 9 months to a year of trying to sort out these genes. We're 4 generations in and see what's going on. Now the females look like this. This female is actually pregnant again, so we're almost on generation 5. Where'd she go? But what I need to do is, in the other room, we've separated a few of these in a few tanks for each generation, but I need to go separate the male and put him with just the best of these females, like this one right here, who already looks pregnant. She's a baby and she's pregnant. Yeah, but that's the scoop, and I'm sticking to it. All right, let's go into the fishy room. The fishy room. The fishy room. Let's go to the lobby. Yeah, let's go to the lobby. Let's go to the lobby to kill some brain cells. All right, so what are you guys looking at? What do you want, weirdos? Oh, yeah. Muck. You want muck. Look at all those tubifex worms. Holy cannoli. I don't know about that. That's a bit intense. I also put baby brine shrimp and the cyclops and the daphnia in here. But, I mean, we got the Kalitawas swooping in and getting a bunch of these worms. We got the Rasbora het, as they call them, or the purple Rasboras, doing their thing. They're the newest addition to the lamb chop or Trigonostigma genera. And then we've got the swordtail kohakus that are in water that is nowhere near hard. So we'll let them do their thing. Guys, I need to decide what we're putting in this tank other than another tank. It's becoming a distraction piece, if you will. So I know that I definitely want to feed this tank well. So we want to feed these little gouramis and these little tetras and these little buggers. Get them fed. We also want to feed my wild mollies well. Even though they mostly eat algae, they'll eat anything. And then let's see if we can get my eel to come out or whatever. Let's see what he's up to. And do. So these guys are cool in that if you have like scuds or something, they'll sift through the sand. These red hump earth eaters. And this tank is a big experiment, you guys. I must admit, he looks pretty happy and healthy, but this filter is not running. The only thing that's running right now is a slow airstone in one corner. And this is just an old substrate. You can see it's pretty thick. And yeah, so I'm kind of testing how far we can push things with that. And then let's see here, we got more of these guys, more of these guys. So, ever wonder what a honey gourami looks like in the wild before we selected for the orange and yellow? Well, there you go. That's what they look like. They're a plainish, silvery gray fish, and they have a little bit of yellow on them. Not the most amazing thing, but I still think they're kind of cool. And then we've got the mollies over here, which if I had been thinking better, I would have put them somewhere that's easier to film. They're very, very flighty. It takes the dominant male being okay with coming down to eat before the females will. And sometimes that takes a moment, other times it happens quick. But I've been kind of playing with what different temperatures do. Apisto colony. Yeah, I'll show you the apistos in a moment. Let's see here. We getting the, wow, they cleaned up those worms and everything pretty quick. I'm not seeing the eel, the peacock eel. We're seeing the geos. These are Steindachnerai, and we got 1, 2 females, and probably 2 males, maybe, I don't know, it could be, it could be another male, but I don't know. But we'll give them and this big old Cory that's 3 inches long, and yeah, there they all are. Get out of here, reflection. We'll let them eat. They seem to be stoked on that. They don't have to sift through the sand, even though that's what they like doing. These guys will, yeah, see, this one's got like a whole little stockpile over here. But I'll step back and we'll see if we can get the eel to come out. Also, gonna put a little bit of stuff in each of these tanks. Let's see here. The bettas can get a little bit. The baby guppies can get a little bit. Boy, these guys also made short work of anything I put in. I guess they like the tube effects. They're supposed to be mostly vegetarian fish. And these guys like the little morsels. These little cichlids would prefer live food, but we got morsels today, guys. We got frozen morsels on the menu. Sorry if it's not to your liking. Okay. Then we're coming over. Come on over. Come on over, baby. And I'll pay attention to the chat once I get these guys squared away. Betta compuncta malak in with some real big mollies, sailfin mollies, affinis. And he is a bulldog of a betta. He is a big old betta. And he hurt his lady, so therefore he has no lady right now. And then I also just recently got this koi Betta splendens female, and I put her in with my Maha chiensis, and apparently she beat up the Maha chiensis, which kind of surprised me because they're a bit hardcore sometimes, but she apparently scared them off. And yeah, the Betta Maha chiensis hasn't been trying to spawn at all. It's just been hiding. Kind of wild. So, whatever. And then, oh yeah, now we got the last blast of bloodworms and tubifex worms and all these goodies. And we're going to get them into the fish that I want to get them the most. Color on up, little gobies and little Apistogramma McMaster-eyes. Come on, little goby. You got this. And put some in here. And one more squirt in here. Boop. That's too much. Oopsie daisy. Try to suck a little bit up out of there. Add a little back into here. Because there's all the fry and all the... There's like 100 little baby fry in there. So they can eat more than you'd think. These guys also made really quick work of the worms. Holy smokes. So, giving them some love. Then we'll give these guys, who I haven't shown you in a while because their tank not looking real pretty. But these rainbow fish, they're also on a no filter diet. So, or lifestyle, I guess you'd call it. So they're not really allowed to eat anything that would be super wasteful usually, that would cause a lot of this ammonia and other detritus. So I don't tend to feed them stuff like bloodworms and tubifex worms and all that kind of stuff that we're feeding right now. But, you know, once every few weeks, you'll cheer them up, give them something special. Everybody's happy now. Everybody's happy now. All the yo-yo loaches, yow. They all dancing through the street. Party, caraba, fiesta, forever. Alright, let's see here. So, let me put these last splashes in the big old tank. Let's see, did they clean up their... Oh, there's Bob. Bob, what are you doing? You're hiding. Why are you hiding, Bob? Okay, well, they earned it. I guess they earned it. So, the winner is Hufflepuff, or whatever. So, there's that. The Logonandra carolensis, by the way, is growing crazy. Look at this thing. Plus, it's got all the autos on it. They love that thing. There's like, I don't know, 4 on it. But this is one of the Logonandras I like. Logonandra miboldi is my favorite. These leaves are like 6 months old, and you can see the algae that grows on them, but they're very tough leaves. And so even where the autos and snails pick it off, it still holds together surprisingly long. Like this one may be a year old, and you can literally see where they ripped through it. but it took that long. Like, they're pretty sturdy, whereas some of the other plants in here, like the Loganon, or like the Barclaya longifolia right here, beautiful plant underneath. I mean, look at that color and everything. It's a bulb plant, but when it gets nibbled on or it gets algae, it just gets, look at this. Like, that's like a week with some algae, and whoever came and tried to clean it off, it just ate holes into it. So it's something to always remember if you got fish that put holes in plants, is to keep track of where they are, what they're doing to your plants, and so forth. But yeah. All right. I've been neglecting the chat, the people, the important ones, you guys. When I went on my crazy rant, about how bad the situation is in the no eel still, guys. I took some pictures of the eel, and maybe I'll take some more if he comes out tonight with the lights off, but I'll try to put them up on Discord. So if you guys didn't know, I have a Discord, and the link is down below. I know earlier the link wasn't live. That's because every like 6 days, or on the 7th day, the link deactivates. And so it's good for a few days, for a week, and then it deactivates. Uh-oh, the bloodworm's causing me to react. Hold on one sec. Let me wash my forehead. Party, fiesta, carabas, forever. You know, he just made up that word. Alex, there were some questions earlier regarding your rack of tanks. Yeah, I should do a video on that. People ask me that a lot, but the rack of tanks, I got that at Home Depot. Lowe's has the same thing. The brand at Home Depot is called Husky, and the metal part of the frame is okay. The wood, the press board, particle board, boy, that's going to turn into a hive right there. Dang. Man, I thought I didn't touch any of the liquid, but if I even touch, like my hand touches it, and then I just do this, boom, I'm going to get welts from the bloodworms. But what was I going to say? Home Depot, the Husky brand, is who makes the big shelf, and they make an even better one that's all metal. The shelf itself is metal on each level too, and you can do 5 levels. This one you can do 4 levels and a top, and the top has no rim or anything. And what I did was I went and I got the exact same size sheets cut out of true plywood. So true strong boating plywood. It's for making cabinets in the boat industry, and it's something that I don't know if you'll find it all over the country, but Seattle is a very big hotspot for boats and sailboats and fixing up boats and stuff. And so it's like plywood that's 1/8 of an inch thick, and one like veneer of it goes one way with the grain going, north to south, and the other one, the next layer goes east to west, and then the next layer goes south to north instead of north to south. And so they basically pancake it like this until it's 5/8 of an inch thick, and then I put a shellac or a stain over that, and then I did an acrylic stain over that so that water couldn't get in around those edges. Then over the floor, I got mats for the kitchen, for what you would use if you owned a restaurant, or like an industrial operating kitchen. And it's got a little bit of padding, like maybe 1/2 inch of padding, but under that is all rubber. So you can, on those mats, they're rated, what are they, 6 feet by 8 feet, I want to say. And I got 2 of those mats and I overlapped them. Then I put the shelves. And the mats can each hold, I believe it was like 6.8 gallons of water. So they're like absorbent carpet with uh, rubber underneath. So I really like them. Do I worry about your floor? Or do I worry about the floor? I worry a little bit. It still kind of attracts humidity underneath, and therefore, like the floor is wearing a little bit. Where like because the carpets do shift slightly, just with me being 250 pounds and moving and carrying things and whatever. And then the shelves probably, it wouldn't surprise me if there's going to be like four little nicks in the hardwood floor just from the weight on the wood for years and years. Um, but yeah, those mats are only like 30 bucks, I think, like 32 bucks when I bought them. And then the shelves were the metal frame for the shelf, which was 4 feet by 2 feet deep by 6 feet tall, 6'2" tall. That is the metal frame called the Husky. There's another brand, and I can't remember what it's called, that they sell at Lowe's also that's real similar. And then I just threw out the boards, and then that was $54 for that rack unit for garage shelving. But then because I went and got that boat cabinet shelf wood, that ended up being, I think that was like 40 bucks a sheet for each each stupid 4 foot shelf. So it ended up being more expensive than anything else, but it wasn't that bad altogether. Each one cost me under 150 bucks, if I recall, under 200 bucks. um Joshua Eustace, hello. Am I in Seattle, Washington? Yes, I am, Ian. Going to track the mats down. Right on. Oh, it feels good out here. It's like cold in Washington now. Yeah, marine plywood is what I think or marine grade plywood, I believe is what they call it. Or maybe laminate composite pressboard plywood. But you don't want hard pressboard. That's a different thing that's like cardboard pressed together with epoxy. Um, let's see here. Fish do I have any boosts? I do have boosts. It's in the main community tank that if we turn around, skeleton, it's back over here. There's stop shaking, Alex. There's boosts next to the moss. There's boosts all along that deep substrate. And I need to move it and clean it because it's starting to get a lot of mold on it. But look at the size. I mean, there's that full 16-ounce cup, and those plants are like 3 feet tall out of the tank at the peak, 2.5 feet, almost a meter. Pretty wild. So, yeah. Alex, I want to replicate your 2.5 gallon tank, Neocaridina, Fluval stratum, very soft tap water, no filter. Yep, that's it. And I used a light that was a $12.50 light. Might be 15 bucks now, but they are 6,000 or 6,500 Kelvin, and I believe they are 2,000 lumens or 1,800 lumens. They're indoor-outdoor floodlights. And Cree, C-R-E-E, makes the LED. I don't even know if there's a name of the knockoff Chinese brand they sell. It's just like the Lowe's brand I bought last time. I bought Amazon brand too. But it worked really well. And I've got several videos on setting that tank up. You know, I put Anubias and things in there at first, and then once little pests started coming, like Planaria and Hydra and all that kind of stuff, then I put some Axelrodi, Sundadanios, the little blue ones, in there, and they ate all of that really well. Young little guppies will nibble on that too. but most things will also eat newborn shrimp if they're going to eat hydra and planaria, because hydra and planaria are not good tasting. They both sting on the way down the mouth, and so it's kind of like loaches and barbs and live bears that tend to uh, give those a go or develop a taste for them over time. That's the thing is, you kind of have to put them in a pipette, take them off the wall, and drop them in so that the fish sees the planaria falling and then tries it. Maybe even after you let the planaria eat some of the food that's in the tank that you were feeding in the shrimp tank or whatever. Um, because that way its gut's going to be loaded at least with more good tasting stuff. Um, Empire of Dirt, Jeff, what's up? How's my leg? My leg is doing well, Robert. Other than it's swollen, the swelling in it is pretty bad. Still, I need to put my feet up again. Like I stayed up all night last night, which I know sounds crazy when you see how simple and silly the video I made was, and like even kind of redundant. Like I wish I don't know, had a better editor that could just say, Alex, you already kind of said that. Just get rid of it. Like, I need to get better at that. I'm working on it. And then, some people I do know, though, want to be told things twice, or they want to be told one way and then another way to make it stick. Or, tell them what you're going to tell them it, then tell them what you told them. That whole thing. So I don't know what the true answer is, especially when this day and age with like quick media is so kind of crazy. But yeah, I didn't stay down while I was doing it. I kind of pace around and work on editing videos on my phone and talking to people and asking questions of anybody who I'm friends with that I would think knows more than I do about the topic at hand. I got a lot of really good answers from the Discord and just from people I text that you guys are friends on here of what 3 rules or 3 questions would you outline for an aquarium. So, like, what are the 3 things that you ask yourself when you're getting ready to plan an aquarium? Like, what is my budget? What ecosystem am I reproducing? What is my tap water like? Whatever it may be, like, what are your questions? And can you think of 3 that will end up covering everything about fish keeping? And I tried my best, and I think I got pretty close with the ones that I came up with. And if you want to know the 3 that I came up with, like, what species are you keeping, or are you on a planted tank? Do you want a dirted tank? Like, how did you cover that? Well, it then causes you to think about another thing. So if you say I want this species, well, right there, if it's a whale shark, well, tough cookies. You're not going to get a whale shark, budget or space or logistics. Sorry, no whale shark in the aquarium hobby. But if it's something reasonable, I want a leopard danio with long fins, and I want 20 of them. Okay, that's reasonable. But sometimes just the inference from that first question answers the next things you need to do. Like, I need a 20-gallon tank or bigger. I need this. I need that. They only eat live food. So I think I got the 3 questions that take care of all of it. So when planning a tank, even if you're an old hobbyist, you've been on the wagon, on the horse for a long time, maybe you should circle the pony around and check out the video, have some fun. Tell me what you would think. You're a beginner in discus fish keeping. Can you help me out how to clean a sump filter and when to add water? Do you have to add water to sump? Do we have to keep separate tank and store? So your sump is part of your tank. It is the same water in a loop. It's just what's being held essentially in the reserve of the filter. If you had a hang off the back filter, or for that matter, a sponge filter, it's the water that's inside of that mechanism. It's what's coming into contact with your filter media. In this case of a sump, you're also giving it space to settle out maybe you're using a pump to get it back through, so it's not an organic circuit. It may be a mechanical circuit that completes it all. But you can change water in the sump, then turn off the sump, dial it into the to what you want, and make sure it matches the upper tank or side tank or low tank, wherever you put the sump, and then open up or turn the pump back on, and all of a sudden, then you'll have an equalized tank and you won't have any shock between the waters. Now you could also do that the other way, try to match the sump with the main tank or vice versa. But there's always going to be a little bit of acclimation, and it doesn't really matter which way you start to do it. You should you'll figure it out, whatever works best for you. Hello, Aqua Escapes. Hello. You guys, yeah, come on. We got, Johnny Best says we got 100 viewers that were live and 56 thumbs up. Guys, double tap your screen if you're on mobile. Or please give me a thumbs up if I've said anything that was of any interest or that angered you severely and you want to fight. If them's is fighting words, let me know in the comments. And them's us, we's fights. Yeah, everybody, please take some of mine. I have 29 gallon I need to set up. I'm just getting fish from my new botanical tank. Nice. You have a 600 gallon in your garage right now. I don't want to hear. I got a 65 and I'm excited about that. I'd be getting some freaking stingrays or something. I'd be getting some whale sharks if I had that that 600, buddy. All right, you guys. I am gonna get out of here. I don't know. I just wanted to say hello and do it a little later tonight. I should have probably let you know that I was gonna do that, but the truth of the matter is that I was really tired when it was time to stream, and my wife was coming home. She went to a concert tonight, and I had to go drive her to the bus station or whatever, and that would have been right in the middle of the 4 p.m. West Coast stream or 7 p.m. East Coast. So I waited, and I was like, I'm going to stream at 1:30, 1 in the morning East Coast time or whatever. So anyways, wondering if you have ever had to deal with Barbronia webera. I haven't. I don't know that fish off the top of my head, but I'm going to Google it when I get off of here, because it sounds so familiar. I just can't think of it off the top of my head. Guys, we might do another stream this weekend if I can fit one in, but the other thing is I'm trying to get back to it. Oh, it's a leech. Great. That's creepy. No, I won't be keeping any leeches. I will not be advocating to keep leeches. I will be terminating leeches with fire. But you guys, Asha, it's always good to see you. And Mick, it's always good to see you. Jeff, it's always good to see you. Aqua Escapes, never good to see you. Go away. No, I'm just kidding. You guys, thank you so much. Also, Martin, I think, renewed membership to the channel. That's great. If you want to do it over on Discord, why don't we do it in the Discord? That's fine, too. Wherever you'd like to do it, I'm happy to do it. I'm ready. I'm here. I'm an angelfish, and get used to it. Guys, I might be at my club meeting tomorrow. Maybe I'll stream it if it's interesting. If Jeff Lupton is up for it. He's going to be talking about shrimp, which I like how we invite shrimp people and we're like, what are you going to talk about? And they're like, shrimp. And like you invite, I don't know, cichlid people and you're like, what are you going to talk about? And if they gave you that answer, cichlids, nobody would be okay with that. They'd all be like, well, what about? Are we doing shell dwellers? Are we doing Mozambique or, Benin or mouth brooders? What? I don't get it. But yeah, shrimp are just like, okay, there's what, 9,000 species of fresh or brackish shrimp, and we're just doing shrimp in general. All right, guys, have a wonderful night. Thanks for joining me again. Always a pleasure, never a treasure. Wait, always a treasure, always a pleasure. Come and go at your own leisure. Thank you so much for members. You guys keep me going. You guys allow the insanity that unfolds here to unfold. And glitch, glitch, glitch. I just felt so good to close my eyes. Now I'm like, all right, it's time to just go to bed. Let's just go to bed. Or maybe I'll have some coffee and do another episode. Anyways, guys, go out and pick mashed potatoes. Go do that. I can't advocate anything about fungi on here, but if you like my autumn videos on fungi, now I can put them on Discord, and I can also put things like the black market mercury dealers of the Amazon and how their mercury is getting kicked up and spread all throughout the Amazon right now. Illegally, and how they're trading illegal carbon credits as well as black market fish and plecos and stingrays and things like that. Other reptiles and birds also all being traded in the same circles there and at the same international level. Pretty interesting stuff that I can't really cover on YouTube, so now I've got a place to cover it over on Discord. The link will be good for another 6 days in the description down below. It should also be pinned in a lot of my recent videos. But if the link's ever expired and you see it somewhere, just look for a newer video on my main channel. You'll find it. They haven't been recommending my videos to y'all too much, I don't think. So it really helps a lot when you guys decide to come swing by the channel on your own, typing it in and clicking on it. It really does help if you watch some videos that way. So I really appreciate those of you who stay loyal, stay true, even when the algorithm says, no for you. No. Rest in peace, dude. All right, guys, I will talk to you later. Have a good one. Take care of the creatures around you, your fish, your plants, your mom, your aunts. And, of course, take care of yourself, or you can't do any of that. Long live the fish. Poisson. Good night. Good luck. Gute Nacht.